Hey guys, Dan from Certified Energy Solutions here, and this little video is basically going to be dedicated to discussing the requirements to make sure that you are actually eligible for the battery rebate with all the information that's been basically published live by the regulator since the 1st of July. So basically all this information's come out in the first week of the rebate going live. That didn't give us any pre-warning on any of this information, by the way. So once again, we're starting on the back foot, but I'll tell you what, we've had to catch up pretty quick with the amount of demand out there. But there's a few things to kind of consider as the homeowner. Now, when you speak to a reputable retailer, part of the process is going to be that retailer is actually going to send a knowledgeable consultant or even an electrician around to do a site inspection on your home to make sure that your house actually meets the requirements to make sure you're eligible for that battery rebate. Now, a few things that they've kind of thrown into the pile for us that we've really got to consider with every single new house now is essentially a set of codes or requirements that need to be addressed to make sure that your house or property, even if it's a business, is actually up to the current Australian standards. Now, obviously this is all safety related within residential homes. There's quite a few homes out there that are probably operating fairly sketchily, and they might not have had a massive upgrade to the home's main switchboard in 20 odd years. So obviously this is a way to make sure that people are actually safe in their homes as well. Now, being licensed electricians, if we do any works on your home and don't ensure that your house is actually brought up to the standards, we can be penalised and fined, and even you can get in a bit of strife as the homeowner as well because the house doesn't comply with Australian standards. Now, when we're talking about Australian standards, a few things to keep in mind, which is one that we see and come across pretty much every single day, is if you've got a main switchboard in your home where your meter is located, whether it be Energex or Ergon, whoever the supplier is for the energy network, all your switches or RCBOs down at the bottom of your switchboard actually require safety circuits. Now, these are normally indicated by a little blue reset button or even an orange reset button. Some of them might even have a black reset button on that RCBO. And these are those little independent circuits that you have labelled up for your hot water, your kitchen circuits, your lights, your water pumps, all that kind of stuff. Now, if any of those switches do not have safety circuits on them, and they need to be per circuit, not just one big 4-pole, needs to be per circuit with a resettable breaker, then that is a requirement that we have to, and it's not optional. As the last electricians on site, we need to upgrade that switchboard to current standards to make sure that we don't get basically fined and there's no issues on you getting the battery rebate. Should they decide they want to do an inspection and that switchboard doesn't meet the compliance, then they can actually deny the rebate, which means you're responsible for the balance of the cost on that system. So that could be a pretty big shock. Now, it's not overly expensive to upgrade those RCBOs on your switchboard. You might be looking at, say, $60 to $80 a breaker, depending on what it is. But at least that way, it ticks all those boxes for the requirement. Now, other things which they've sprung on us, which is basically a last second addition on the 1st of July, the day of the rebate going live, is if you are installing a battery system, which is a BESS, a battery system in your house, and say, for example, it's an internal installation inside the garage, which is conjoined with the home. It's actually part of the requirement now to ensure that your house has basically fire alarms in every single room in that property. So bedrooms, living areas, hallways, kitchens, and you also have to have an alarm system in the garage where the system is installed. Now, the other little bit of a surprise bit here is they need to be an interconnected system, so they can't be cheap fire alarms from Bunnings that you're going to pick up for $20. These need to be either hardwired in or connected on a Wi-Fi network and able to communicate throughout the whole entire home. So this is all part of that compliance, and literally this was only updated and provided to retailers with the information on new claims going through as of the 1st of July as part of that requirement. So they're probably two of the biggest things that you need to consider, and obviously a consultant or retailer would advise you if you will have those potential extra costs, and it should be picked up in the consultation stage and not sprung on you as a last second thing. So that's all very, very important to go through that detail. Now, if the battery system is installed in a separate garage, let's say, for example, it's disconnected for the home and you've got a double garage that's actually separated by a driveway or a walkway and not physically connected to the home, you can go down to Bunnings and buy a $20 or $30 fire alarm and stick it in the garage. So obviously the requirements drop off a little bit, more because you're not physically sleeping in that garage itself. Other things to keep in mind with the rebate, and obviously this might even be checked by inspectors as well, because the amount of money that's going through from federal government, I dare say that these sites will be inspected and checked up on. Now, another thing to keep in mind is if your battery system is in a garage, and let's say for example on the reverse wall of that plaster you've got a bedroom, then you require something called concrete or FC sheeting, which is basically a fire retardant barrier between the battery system and that habitable room where you could potentially be sleeping. So that's something to keep in mind. The only other requirement for a homeowner that you'd have to consider is the distance between the very top battery in your stack and also the ceiling of the property. So you've actually got to have a minimum gap between the top of the battery, and it doesn't include your inverter, it's only from the top of the battery. So top of the battery to the ceiling is 900 millimeters is the minimum space between that distance when you install a full stack. So some systems like Red Earth and Skybox, they're quite low but wide and deep, so the battery systems are actually stacked horizontally. Whereas you look at SIG Energy systems like a vertical stackable system with their SIG Install product or Side Install, with that product there, you're in a situation where every battery you put on there obviously increases in physical height. So obviously that's going to get closer and closer to the ceiling. Most regulation roofs or ceilings are high enough that 900 mil rule works, so you shouldn't have a problem there. Now when it comes to spacing, the only other thing to keep in mind is the battery system needs to be a minimum of 600 mils away from any windows or door opening, including garage doors, roller doors, things like that. So you've got a minimum clearance there between that battery system and that opening. So you can do things to work around that, like, build in a window if it's a window that's not being used, and you can utilize that wall space. There's different ways we can work around that without actually bending the rules, but fitting within that requirement as well. So you can always chat to us and we can give you the options, and we'll work with you for the best installation location while staying compliant at the same time. So yeah, just a few things to consider. Obviously, if you're in the early stages, you need to be aware of all this stuff, because obviously if the installer doesn't pick up on this requirement for the rebate and they go ahead and install the system, unfortunately, if the rebate gets knocked back, it's going to lead to them generally saying, look, we've got to rectify all this work on site, which might involve ripping it out and starting again. Or you might even find the retailer could potentially come back to you and ask you for the balance. So hopefully there's not too many unreputable guys out there that will do that for their own mistakes. But once again, as a homeowner, you should be fully informed on this process. And I don't think there's enough information online for you to really get your head around all the requirements, because obviously you don't see that back end stuff. You only get the negative effects if it goes pear-shaped. But obviously with us, we'll pick up on all this stuff at the start, so it'll be a nice smooth process from start to finish, and you won't have any grief. But anyway, feel free to reach out if you need clarification or a little bit more information. We're happy to run through it with you. All right, talk to you later.